Hello, I'm Mandy Christopher and this is Barbara George Jagley. We're from the Department of Primary Industries.
My background is as a cropping researcher and I own a small farm in southeast Queensland.
I grew up on a cropping and sheep property in South Australia. I've worked as a researcher in broadacre cropping for over 30 years. We're both part of DPI's Carbon Outreach team, which is tasked with bringing independent advice to Queensland producers about emissions reporting and reducing greenhouse gas emissions. So why should you, as a broadacre farmer, care about greenhouse gas emissions? Agriculture accounts for around 19% of Australia's greenhouse gas emissions. This percentage is likely to increase as the energy and transport sectors reduce their emissions.
Mandy, why should a broadacre cropper need to know and report their greenhouse gas emissions?
There are three main drivers for understanding greenhouse gas emissions from your farm: industry drivers, market access, and government policy. Many of the businesses that you supply your products to have set their own emissions targets. This has been driven mostly by consumers who are increasingly interested in the environmental impact and carbon footprint of the products they buy. Your farm's emissions account towards the overall emissions related to the business you deal with. So your financial institution and your buyers are likely to soon ask you about your emissions. Some examples are shown here, including financial institutions, some of whom are now offering green loans to help farmers reduce emissions. Other major consumers of your products, such as grains, like Viterra and Ingham poultry producers, have also set emissions targets for their businesses. So buyers in the not too distant future might be looking to favour buying from producers with lower emissions, or even paying a premium to contribute to their meeting their greenhouse emissions targets. There are also environmental accreditation requirements for export market access for certain regions.
We've all heard about net zero by 2050, but there are a number of other Australian and Queensland government policies and regulations which are aimed at reducing greenhouse gas emissions. For example, the safeguard mechanism, which requires some of the largest emitters to reduce their emissions over time, either directly or through offsetting their emissions by buying carbon credits from other businesses. A fairly new regulation is the change to the Corporations Act, which has made emissions reporting mandatory for larger businesses. Under these changes, businesses will need to publish an annual sustainability report revealing Scope 1 and 2 greenhouse gas emissions caused by their operations and electricity consumption. Scope 3 emissions that include their supply chain will be included from July 2026. The size of companies required to report is gradually becoming smaller. That means that smaller supply businesses and primary producers may be asked for their emissions data as Scope 3 obligations by buyers in their second year of reporting climate data. GrainCorp is listed here as an example of a company that falls under this legislation. Getting back to answering our initial question, why should we care about greenhouse gas emissions? Because your supply chain has set targets that will make low emission inputs more attractive to them. So lower emissions may give you a competitive advantage. Because some international markets require overseas producers to meet the same environmental requirements as their local producers. And because government legislation requires large businesses to report their emissions, including the emissions from their upstream suppliers, such as primary producers.
Do you want to know more? For example, what you need to know to calculate your emissions? We've produced several more of these videos addressing different aspects of what broadacre farmers need to know about greenhouse gases and emissions accounting. The Carbon Outreach Project is funded through the Farm Business Resilience Program, which is jointly funded by the Australian and Queensland governments. We'd also like to acknowledge the University of Melbourne that produced many of the educational materials we drew on for this presentation,